Welcome to the Squared Circle Pit with your host, Rob Pasbani.
Now entering the Squared Circle Pit, he was the voice of WCW and TNA Total Nonstop Action Pro Wrestling. He has a new book out called Sitting Ringside, Volume 1, WCW. The great David Penzer is entering the Squared Circle Pit. Welcome, David. Thank you so much for hanging out with me.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. Thank you for what you said. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I was a big fan of your work, obviously, as a fellow broadcaster. I'm sure you get that a lot. And also just I feel like you had the dream job for every young kid who had no athletic ability that watches pro wrestling, which is being the ring announcer.
You're absolutely correct about the absolutely no athletic ability part. Yeah, it was a dream job. I mean, as I go into more detail in the book, right around the time I was flunking out of college, I was me and my friend Jeff, we used to watch, I don't know if you remember this, I'm dating myself, Tuesday Night Titans on USA Network. It was like a WWF talk show hosted Vince McMahon, and we would get stoned back then and watch it and just laugh our asses off. Of course, now that it's legal, haven't done it in 40 years, but that's a whole different story. But we used to sit there, man, and we used to say, man, if we could have a drink with like one person on earth, I'd love to have a drink with Bobby Heenan. I mean, like the funniest guy in the world. And fast forward, not that many years, 5-6 years, I'm drinking with Bobby Heenan, I'm hanging with Mean Gene, riding with Ric Flair and Arn Anderson. That's a dream. Absolutely. You put it best. I don't think all the media I've done have been great, and all have come at this from a different angle, which I appreciate it. But I think you said it best. I was living every non-athletic kid's dream.
Yeah. So how did it start? I did read in previous interviews, you were interested in broadcasting. You had a radio show in school. How did you kind of fall into? Were you always interested in being in front of the microphone?
I mean, I don't know that I thought about it, but I always ended up in front of it. So I guess, when I was a kid, I was in my elementary school. I used to do the morning announcements and Pledge of Allegiance. And, then I did the radio thing. I had a mobile DJ business. We did bar mitzvahs and sweet 16s and weddings and stuff. So yeah. And then this, now once I became a DJ, there was a 1 in a gazillion chance that I might have a spot into a small little indie promotion called Global Wrestling Alliance. And I used the ring announcing thing to try to get my way in. But I don't think I ever thought about, even as I grew up being from the age of 11 years old, being obsessed and mesmerized by professional wrestling. I don't think I actively thought, if I could get on a microphone and learn how to speak, I could be a ring announcer. I just didn't. It just all happened.
That's it. So what was, when you got into it at age 11, what's your earliest wrestling memory? Like, what was the first angle or storyline that you can recall?
Two of the most charismatic wrestlers in the history of this business, superstar Billy Graham as the heel, Dusty Rhodes as the babyface, championship wrestling from Florida in 1977. I turned on that channel. My cousin staying with us, and he said, "Let's watch wrestling." And I said, "What's wrestling?" He says, "You don't know what wrestling is?" I said, "No. It's on every Saturday at 6:00 with Gordon Soley on channels on at noon. Sorry, on Channel 6 with Gordon Soley." And he turned it on, and I never missed another one.
That's a great primer. I feel, I didn't get to watch.
There was no DVR back then. There was nothing. There was nothing. So you either saw it or you didn't. So you kind of had to be there. Yeah. It's it's real these days to be able to go out and survey what you want to look at, YouTube and Hulu and all those networks. But back then, if you didn't turn on Channel 6 at noon on Saturday, man, you weren't going to see it again.
So did you only get championship wrestling from Florida, or did you get other territories as well? And eventually, I'm guessing
for years and years, probably for the first 3 or 4 years I was a fan, I only got championship wrestling from Florida. I was reading the magazines and things that were out, and so trying to get up to speed on. Before I started reading the magazines, I didn't even realize that there were other promotions. I'm 11 years old. You don't really think like that. You're like, oh, I just want to watch championship wrestling from Florida. You don't say, I wonder if there's a promotion in New York, and I wonder if there's a promotion in Texas. Once I started reading the magazines, I figured that out. But yeah, after a while, Georgia Championship Wrestling came on TBS Superstation, and I fell in love with that as much, if not more than Championship Wrestling from Florida, because Georgia Championship Wrestling and then WCW after it ended up being like where all the big boys ended up on Saturdays. All the top stars from every territory. You get Junkyard Dog in from Louisiana, Dusty Rhodes in from Florida, Piper and Flair in from the Mid-Atlantic, and so everybody sent their big stars because they wanted their big star, those eyes that were on the national, watching on a national level, so that they would, maybe if they saw him on that, they realize, oh, he's coming to my town on Friday in Shreveport, Louisiana. So yeah, so that was in some ways almost better, although not as organic as an 11-year-old kid, turning on wrestling for the first time and not knowing what it is and going nuts on it. And then a couple of weeks later, going to the Fort Lauderdale National Guard Armory and sitting, I think, in the second row and seeing it in person.
That's really cool. So you're saying you're DJing in high school and you're doing all this, work in front of the mic. How do you get the job at Global Wrestling? How did you make the connection in? What was your foot in the door?
Well, Global Wrestling Alliance was a company that opened in 1986. They raised capital on the penny stock market, which no longer exists for a reason. They had a building in Davie, Florida. I lived in Fort Lauderdale, where they had an office, and then in the back they had, in the warehouse part, they had a school. They hired Larry Malenko to run the school, the great Malenko. They hired Bob Roop to be the booker. And the guy whose ring name was Dr. Red Roberts, real name Dr. Michael Brannon. He was a wrestler who did a heel psychologist gimmick, but he was a shoot psychologist in real life. And so my dad was also a psychologist, and somebody who worked with him knew Michael Brannon and said, hey, my real good friend of mine, coworker, son is like obsessed with wrestling. I know you're running a wrestling company now. If you need a ring announcer, if you could get him in the door, that'd be great. And so they told me to come to their next taping at the Diplomat Hotel just to kind of see around. And I did. They had a Elvis impersonator that they used tapings, and he actually did all the TV. I never did any of their TV. I did some house shows for them, but yeah, I started hanging around the offices after schools, and in the evenings, and basically as the stooge. You need somebody to take the garbage out. You need somebody to go run and get you some beer. Although I couldn't buy beer, but you get the point. Do you need somebody to bring you a coffee on a small level like that? Probably they didn't give a crap that I wasn't in the wrestling business. They were three old timers who, were now running a company in this new landscape of Hulkamania and wrestling, and probably thought it was pretty cool to have a stooge around. So, slowly but surely they started giving me the time of day, and just incredible and improbable, almost impossible breaks from there that shouldn't have happened, that luckily did.
Yeah, I think the modern branding of a stooge would be an intern or a production assistant.
Sure. But, and you think I was a stooge then? Wait until I got my pinky toe in the door of W, man. We were thinking about calling the book Stooge of the Year, because I was Stooge of the Year in WCW, man. I wasn't only, getting people coffee. I was for promos, running off copies, having wrestlers fill out the sign-in sheets, and that was an amazing experience to have all these people that you had been watching for so long: Rock and Roll Express, Four Horsemen, Road Warriors, JYD, Tommy Rich, to name a few, the Midnight Express. They had to sign my little pay sheet to get paid. The funny thing is, what they also didn't know is the tiny little letters that are above where they signed the sheet basically is the reason why none of them go back and sue for any of the money that WWE is making off of Peacock, or before that WWE Network, because all that little paperwork said, if you sign this sheet and we agree to pay you for being here, then we have we could use this in perpetuity until the end of time without giving you any additional funds. So Bobby Fulton one time, and Bobby's a great guy. He was on his high horse on social media. This is years ago, on about how he's going to sue WWE because they're using him and he never signed anything. And I called him up and I said, Bobby, I said, remember when they called me Walking Man? Junkyard Dog named me Walking Man. He said, yeah, I remember that. I said, remember that sheet you had to fill out with all the little writing up on top to get paid? He goes, yeah, I remember that. I said, that specifically said you don't have any right to anything. And that was the end of that. So, just a little backstage, how the sausage was made type stuff.
So you mentioned getting your pinky toe in WCW. How did you make the transition from Global to WCW and get in there?
Well, long or short, and we go into detail in the book for sure, and fun stories along the way. But the long and short of it is the company went out of business. I convinced Bob Roop that me and him should buy the ring and do indie shows. We would drive down the road doing indies. We became friends, and he taught me a lot about the wrestling business. Bob, at one point in 1990, when Ole Anderson got the book and WCW got hired as a road agent, I told Bob, hey, put in a good word for me. Never in a million years thinking he'd ever utter my name. He mentioned it to a guy named Jody Hamilton, who was one of my favorite wrestlers growing up as the Masked Assassin. And Jody Hamilton, I used to tell Jody, you saw something in me that wasn't there. I mean, in 1990, I understand how it is now, but in 1990, in the World Championship Wrestling, the National Wrestling Alliance, the second biggest promotion in the world, or at least the country, if not the world, you didn't let a non-wrestler, and your last name was like Race, i.e. Harley, or Thez, i.e. Lou, if you weren't a wrestler and or a referee or an office person, who almost all of them used to be wrestlers, you didn't get in the back. You just didn't. But somehow I did. I brought up enhancement guys from Florida. And that was the deal Jody was doing with different parts around the country. He had different guys who were wrestlers who would bring guys up because he was in charge of booking enhancement talent. And he gave opportunity to bring some guys up. And like I said, I got my pinky toe in the door. And I said, you want me to bring some guys again next week? And he said, sure. And I said, what? I didn't say it out loud, but it just all went from there. It was crazy. I wasn't going to stop. From there, I never missed a WCW taping, even before I was ring announcing. I never missed a show I was booked on or my guys were booked on. We once rolled a van on our way from Florida up to Georgia, got in a police car, went to the rental car company while they were towing the van off, and rented and got another one to finish making the loop. And people take notice of that.
Yeah, I'm sure your dedication definitely helped with the invite backstage.
This might be an interesting story. We go into way a ton of depth with really fun stories and how it became. But I'm just giving you the broad strokes of the story. But Jeff, for sure, if you're interested, if anybody thinks it sounds a little bit interesting, then you could go to davidpenzerbook.com. davidpenzerbook.com or Amazon. One other thing I wanted to point out about the book is the reason this book became started, because I never wanted to write an autobiography ever. I mean, as of a year ago, I didn't want to write one. I'm still wondering how it happened. But I was going through my desk, cleaning out my desk about a year and a half ago, and I found a file with these old formats, internal memos from WCW Saturday Night from the 90s, Worldwide from Disney, internal memos from the manage the talent about different things, even including the last Nitro format, which funny enough has never turned up anywhere. And so I was just wanted to find a way to put that out, monetize it, and get it out there, and put a copy of one of the formats on Twitter, and was just taking ideas from people. Hey, you think this is cool? Yeah, I want one. I want this. Okay, what would you pay for it? I don't know. How should I sell it? People were telling me different ideas, and Guy Evans called me, PM me, and said, we need to talk tomorrow. Don't do anything with that stuff. And originally it was just going to be a scrapbook with all the 200 pages of old formats and memos and stuff. And I was going to tell some stories about guys that were in my memories of, being there, for the last Nitro and stuff like that. Well, About 3 months in, Guy Evans calls me and says, "We're doing 2 books." I said, "I know we were doing volume 2 and volume 1." He said, "No, we're still doing volume 2, but we're going to make this biography now. Your story is fascinating and entertaining." And I said, "You better be a good writer." And thank God he was. So if you have no interest in my story, but you want to get a hold of these very cool and never before seen, extremely rare formats and memos, including the last Nitro, including the Thunder where David Arquette won the world title, you might want to go to davidpenzerbook.com there and, get the book. You could read all the cool stuff. And, when you're bored, you could actually read the book and you might, get a chuckle or two. So anyway, didn't mean to politic here, but I just wanted to get that
Sure,
in.
yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Guy. I love this first book, Nitro. I really enjoyed the amount of depth you went in, and I definitely think you picked a great co-author to help you write the book, because he obviously knew the material, and he, if anybody cares about those format sheets, it's Guy Evans.
I'll tell you what, man. And I mean, I've been blessed with so much luck and good fortune, and to be living my dream for 30 years, and then I, after all that, I got blessed with Guy Evans, who might be my best luck ever. He's probably, and nothing against other writers that write wrestling stuff. There's a lot of talented people out there, but I think, based off the Nitro book and Eric Bischoff's second autobiography, Grateful, and my book, where he was able to make my story really sound interesting, and my stories sound fun and intriguing, and the ribs that I talked about and stuff like that. There's a whole chapter on ribs and adventures on the road and stuff like that. So I'm getting a lot of positive feedback about that. There's a whole chapter on the announcers trailers and my thought on all the different announcers. Think about the announcers that were all in one company. Probably you'll never get a roster like that again. We spoke about Mean Gene and Bob Heenan and Dusty Rhodes and Tony Bonnie and Mike Tenay and Larry Zbyszko. That's a room full of a lot of knowledge and a lot of fun. Once they started telling stories and stuff, and I go into depth on each one of them and my experiences and my thoughts. So just a lot of fun. And sorry I got you off track. So if you want to keep
that was
going,
great. I actually, Guy actually sent me that chapter to in preparation for this interview, and I really enjoyed it. And we actually have the exact same favorite Dusty Rhodes promo. I also, that's my favorite one.
And it's not hard times.
Yeah. And so I was curious, obviously this podcast focuses on the intersection of music and pro wrestling, and WCW had a ton of musical acts come through. Do you have any memories of when Kiss or Megadeth or any of these rock acts performed on Nitro?
No, they kept those guys. So, they're in their tour bus in the back. They didn't even come in. It's not like they were sitting in a catering and you could have a conversation with them. Insane Clown Posse, they were big fans. So they would come in and dress with the guys. And I got to introduce Travis Tritt at Road Wild. He was nice. Had a brief conversation with him, was a big fan at the time. The Misfits fans. So they hung out with the guys. But the big money acts, maybe we got to see sound check and that was it, and look, one of the threads throughout the book is I just tried to stay out of the way for the most part. If I didn't bring attention to myself, then I was hoping everybody'd forget I was there and just, because nothing's guaranteed in life. I was riding this wave, living my dream, and I didn't want it to crash. So I just tried to stay out of the way. So what I was going to do is go up to Gene Simmons, who I did later meet, and is a super nice guy. I actually met him a couple times. But the last thing I'm going to do at that place is go to Gene Simmons and say, "Hey, could I have your autograph?" Not going to happen.
Makes total sense. I totally understand. You're probably walking on eggshells. There's a lot of egos. You don't want to be in the wrong place and get heat for a handshake with Gene Simmons.
I had the people there that I trusted, the announcers trailer, and then the Kevin Sullivan and Arn and Pee Wee Anderson till he left, and I had people I trusted, I could tell them stiff, or, hey, did you hear this story, but for the most part, I stayed, under the radar.
It's interesting because I feel like reading about WCW just, from the outside, obviously I'm sure it wasn't exact, but as a teen growing up, it really taught me a lot about business politics. And I'm sure you had to learn on the job about, who you could be friendly to, like you're saying, who you should go out of your way to say hello to, who you should avoid talking to, because there's these relationships that nobody's giving you a handbook of how to, do this. You have to figure this out on your own.
Yeah, you sort of did. I had some, people like Jody, Bob Roop taught me a lot about, what to do, around a situation like that. Jody taught me so much about the wrestling business. Aaron, or Pee Wee was the first one to really take me under his wing, as far as being on the road. We traveled together and, rules of the road. And yeah, it's like, you'd think that, since Eric was the go up and kiss Eric's ass. Hey, how's the family? Blah, blah, blah. I soon found out that Eric wasn't like that, and nothing against Eric. He's just not that type of personality to this day. But certainly not when he had the weight of the world on him, with a major company that was, he was running, and a lot of egos and a lot of stuff like that, and a lot of, Turner people that didn't like it and tried to interfere. And so, I quickly realized that, if you walk by Eric, you nod your head and he nods back if he's in a good mood, and not to take it personally too, because it wasn't personal. It was just, he had no time or need to talk to me. And so he wasn't going to pretend like he was going to schmooze. And I'd rather have somebody like that than somebody who, makes you think they're your buddy and then fires you later. So
makes total sense. And one thing I was curious about is, how did you develop your style? You of course have your signature announcing style. And did you take influence from the announcers before you or your contemporaries? Like, how did you form? Because we're talking right now and I would never know that this is the same David Penzer that does ring announcing. Obviously you use a different voice, a little more projection, I assume, than just when we're doing a Zoom interview. So yeah, how did you develop that?
I didn't have time to think about it. I just did me. Everybody back then was doing Howard Finkel, and I was not going to do Howard Finkel. A, I didn't have the voice for it, and B, I'm not the type of person to rip off. I learned a lot, being in the back and ringing the bell at the hard camera and stuff from Gary Capetta for so many years about how to work the crowd and keep them excited, and little tricks that he used to hype them up. And so, some of that, I don't want to say I stole that, but I took that and I made it my own. As far as my voice, I just started talking into a mic. I had done it my whole life, so I didn't put any thought into it. It's, in hindsight, you think that, you were it almost seems lazy, but at the time I didn't have time to think about it. I just did me, and and somehow me worked, thank God.
And what was it like? Were you at ringside for the NWO angle at Bash at the Beach where Hogan came out? Were you sitting ringside for that one?
I was. I've never missed a pay-per-view or a Nitro or a Thunder or any scheduled tape. Only taping I ever missed in 30 years of the Impact taping a couple years ago, because COVID kicked my ass for about 6 weeks. But I was in the hospital for 3 days. But that's the only television taping I've ever missed. I don't miss things that I agree to do and do it. I get there and I do it, and I do it to the best of my ability. But kind of pissed off at COVID for denying me saying that I never missed a TV taping. But
I think you could get away with it. Nobody would call you out on it.
Yeah, I
with the COVID.
I was there at Bash at the Beach. I sort of knew, and again we do a deep dive into this in the book. But I sort of knew that they wanted Hogan to do it, but I nobody was really sure. Everybody sort of knew that was what they wanted to happen, but it wasn't on a format anywhere and spoken about. So it's like everybody had to act like, even though that's where they wanted to go, and if he walked out, that was what's going to happen. Nobody knew who was going to walk out. When I went to the ring, Hogan still wasn't at the building, so nobody knew. But he walked out and he did it and cut a hell of a promo, and the fans threw a lot of garbage and crap at him. And I spent the next 3 years ducking garbage. That was another potential name of the book: 3 years of ducking garbage, my life in W. But yeah, and it set the world on fire. And I don't even think they knew it was going to. It was just organic. And I've said this in other podcasts, but one of my favorite things that happen in wrestling are things that happen organically, i.e., the fans decide they like, and they lead the way instead of the booker or the booking team deciding. I give an example like Rusev Day. From everything that I know, Vince actually absolutely hated that, and the fans decided they didn't give a crap. They loved it, and they were going to do all the stuff they did with it. And that's the stuff to me that's fun in wrestling, the organic stuff or the surprises. I don't betray anybody for putting out spoilers as long as they're marked spoilers. But I remember I was out there after Halloween Havoc in Las Vegas, Nevada, and unbeknownst to me and 95% of probably the crew and the wrestlers and the production, the bagpipes started playing. And if I didn't know that in advance, I'd have been hot that I didn't get that pop that I had, that personal pop in me, that one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, maybe my favorite promo of all time was here. And I understand why people, as I want to know. Sometimes I'll click that spoilers, don't click here if you don't want to know, and sometimes I regret it. But it's just it's human nature. But yeah, it's just the little wrestling kid in me when Piper's bagpipes hit. Just I had to remind myself to keep my composure that I was there at ringside representing the company and not a fan behind the fence, behind the gate. So yeah, it's a world we live in a lot of different ways. Some ways better, some ways worse. But I've had a hell of a ride, and I'm so grateful for anyone who played a small part of it. Grateful for anyone who wants to read about it or hear about it. Let's see how long we can get to keep this thing going. If it ended tomorrow, it was a hell of a ride.
Do you still keep up with pro wrestling? Like, do you watch any of the programming? Do you check in occasionally? Do you just follow it on social media?
I DVR almost everything. I wasn't into WWE for the longest time, and a funny thing happened. A clip went viral of this group called The Bloodline, where Jey Uso was in the ring and couldn't stop laughing, and he was making everybody else laugh. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, with Sami Zayn.
Yeah, and I actually saw it. I was at Chris Jericho's house, and I showed Jericho, and he was cracking up, and he said that's a really good angle. And so that next SmackDown, I DVR'd SmackDown I hadn't done probably in 10 years, and I fast forwarded to the Bloodline stuff, and to this day I'm fast forwarding to the Bloodline stuff on every show. Man, I'm a huge fan of the Bloodline. It's really a remarkable story. Stayed on top and making money for 4 years. That's almost impossible in this business, to be able to create for 4 years, no vacations. I know Roman Reigns takes some time off, but they're creative in how they keep it going without him. And I think it's entertaining, and I think it's well done. You never know where it's going to go, and I'm a big fan of that. Big fan of AEW. They put a lot. Both companies put a lot of wrestling out. I find it's easier just to sit down and watch TNA. If you fast forward through the commercials, it's about an hour and 30 minutes. And, if you go through Raw and SmackDown and then Dynamite and Rampage and Collision, that's a lot of stuff to go through. So usually what I'll do, I'll DVR it. I'll read somebody's review of it, and then I'll fast forward to the parts that I think sound interesting, and then go stop at the parts I think are interesting. But yeah, I've never not been in love with professional wrestling in one form or fashion.
That's great. I admire that. And I'm the same way. And I feel like the tribalism can get tiresome, because I feel growing up, it's like if you were a fan of wrestling, you were basically a fan of everything. You had your favorites, but you tried to watch as much as you could.
And just to double down on that, while everybody certainly takes pride in the work that they do and that their company does, I'm sure that WWE was over the moon that they had such a successful WrestleMania, and but there's nothing in that company. Wrestler, talent, producer, production, referee, it doesn't matter. In any company that's rooting for another company to go out of business, because they have friends in that company. They might even have family or spouses in that company. They might be able to get more money jumping to that company down the road, or at least use it to their advantage, the fact that it's there and they're interested in them. I'm fans, and I know that tribalism is a big thing now, and with Twitter and social media and all that. But just, like what you like, don't like what you don't like, but don't root for anybody's failure. I don't understand that part of it. I really don't. I'm old school, but and I've said it many times. Brett Lauderdale is a genius, and he's a nice guy, and I consider him a friend. Once you take fluorescent light bulbs out, you've lost me. But that's just me. There's a ton of people all over the country that love it and that pack issues. And so that's great. If you enjoy it, God bless you. Go enjoy it. I don't, so I don't. But I don't wish them bad. When I see they sell out, in Korakuen Hall, how do you pronounce it in Japan? One of my listings that's still there is to do a show at that building in Japan. I better learn how to pronounce it before I do a show. But yeah, so I'm rooting for everybody. I just, there's some things that aren't my cup of tea.
You nailed it. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And people don't understand sometimes that this is still a business and people need places to work. And the more places to work, the healthier it is for the industry as a whole. Like wrestling was depressing in, 2004, 2005, when there was only one real show in town and a few indies with not that many budgets. Before, I guess, right before TNA started, I feel it was tough.
Yeah, just in a quick example, my son yesterday said, "Dad, see on social media that everybody's turning on Cody Rhodes." And I said, "I watched SmackDown on Friday, and Cody Rhodes was as over as he ever was. They blew the roof off the place when he came out, when his music hit." He goes, "Yeah, but if you look on Twitter, people are tired of this and people think this." And I'm like, I said, "You're never going to please everybody, they're nitpicking, what do you want to talk about tonight? You know what? If you don't like it, fast through it. Don't watch it. I think it's a cool kind of catchphrase, and it pops the crowd, and that's kind of the definition of doing this, is to draw a crowd and entertain them. So, if you don't like it, then I don't have any bad feelings. If you don't like Cody, then that's fine. But I will tell you that the wrestling fans are not turning, in the majority, are not turning on Cody Rhodes. At least not now. You never know down the road what might happen. But because fans are fickle, you saw with Cena and The Rock even recently.
And also, it's just in Twitter, there's a chamber. It's like it's just five people had something negative to say about Cody, and now everyone hates Cody.
Yeah.
Or 100 people quote tweet one guy saying he doesn't like Cody, being like, take a look at this guy, and because 100 people retweeted it, it might seem like it's a lot more. So I agree with you
exactly.
completely.
There was 12,000, 15,000 people in the building on Friday night that sure liked him, and 100, or even if it's 200 or even if it's 1,000 world that don't like him, then I'm sure that he'd be able to sleep at night, and knowing that not everybody in the world loves everything that you do all the time.
Totally agree. David, thank you so much for hanging out. I again want to mention the book, Sitting Ringside, Volume 1, WCW. It's out now, available at davidpenzerbook.com. David, any final words about the book? A final pitch for my readers and viewers on why they should.
If you want to, yeah. If you want to, if you go to davidpenzerbook.com, there's a couple of bundles. You could just buy the book. You could, but same price, free shipping, same as Amazon. So you could buy it on Amazon as well. But there's some bundles, if you want, where you actually get some of the formats sent to you. And, I've thought about this. I've been sitting on this Last Night show for a while. I didn't want to tell anybody I had it, because who knows who else has it. But I'm surprised actually that nobody's came up and said, "Oh, I have one." I just never told anybody. And I'm sure people do, but it's a long time to hold on to something and know where it is. I forgot I had it, but yeah, I think it would be cool to like go to a WrestleCon and have Flair and Sting sign by where their match was the last night ever, and then hang that up in my office, So if you want packages that enable you to do things like that, all the formats and stuff are in the book. But if you want something that's tangible that you can hang in your office, check out those different deals, for lack of a better word. And I just appreciate everybody who, quite frankly, everybody who gives a shit. I'm just so happy that I got to do what I love for so many years and continue to do so. And if you were a fan, or if you paid, if you came up and shook my hand or took a picture, anytime, I'm humbled by that. And I just thank you for allowing me to live my dream. And I hope other people get Maybe some people will read this book and say, you know what, I want to try to live my dream, and it may not be professional wrestling.
Yes, inspiring words to wrap us up here on the podcast. David, thank you so much for your time. I'm a huge fan of your work, of your body of work. So it's been great to be able to talk to you for a little bit. Maybe I'll see you at one of these conventions down the line.
Sure, sure, absolutely. Come up and say hey, and I thank you for having me on, and hope you enjoyed the book.
Oh, yeah, I very much look forward to reading it. Thank you so much. David Penzer on the Squared Circle page.